Herb. Herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Herb.
Hello, you got DanK here, and here got some evening news for you, or cannabis news, or rather, I should say. Mainly from Medford. Most of the stuff we have this evening is concerning Medford. There's a lot going down there. Start out with this story here. Marijuana thieves caught by alert neighbor. An alert neighbor notified the Medford Police Department that a male subject wearing a mask was climbing over a neighborhood fence. Officers responded to the call in the 1500 block of Dakota Avenue. They found that the subject was gone from the scene, but he had cut down a mature marijuana plant from a neighbor's yard. The marijuana plant was being grown under a medical marijuana permit. Officers were able to follow a path of marijuana debris to the suspect's vehicle, which was parked next door at a friend's house. Officers found the suspect hiding in a back room. He was taken into custody along with a co-conspirator. Jacob Randall Granger, 20, of Grants Pass, was lodged on charges of theft 3, possession, trespass, and possession of a controlled substance, more than 1 ounce of marijuana. Austin Cole Pratt, 18, of Medford, was lodged on charges of theft 3 and hindering prosecution. So, similar to a case here in Eugene, we have a friend of ours, a medical marijuana patient, similar thing. Plant was stolen from his backyard. The only thing is, say a hapless burglar that happened to be riding past a police stakeout with his pot plant and got stopped. And so in an attempt to lessen his charges, he offered to take the police to show where the marijuana grow was. So when he took the police back to the marijuana grow, they also nailed him for theft because it was a legal medical marijuana grow. That happened here in Eugene. So anyway, we still have a lot of thievery in Medford, and that was just one case. But that was a real criminal. That was this person didn't have a badge. The ones I want to tell you about now carry badges. Central Point, Oregon. For the third time in as many weeks, the Drug Enforcement Administration raided a South American medical marijuana grow. Local growers say their 100 plant grow was legal and in compliance when the DEA ripped the pot from the ground. Now those growers say they feel like they're targeted, if they're legal or not. Medical marijuana advocates are protesting on the 12,000 block of Table Rock Road where the raid finished Friday afternoon. Organizers of the protest say they want to get the word out about what they say are gross injustices for growers and patients. Starting at 9 a.m., more than 100 plants were ripped from the ground at the medical marijuana garden. The homeowner, Clifford Ruthland, says he grows for about 20 patients. He says his garden was in compliance, but after the other raids, he says it's clear that it was not about card and plant numbers. It's a clash of federal and state laws, and growers say the raids leave them feeling angry and violated. From my personal perspective, it's kind of like, why are you even here? Isn't there something more important that's affecting people's lives in a real important way, like than being here right now? Ruthven says he was handcuffed for the majority of the day. The 100-plus cannabis plants and some of his property were confiscated by the federal agency. He was not arrested or charged, and he is joining the protest. And then this one here out of Ashland. Local suppliers and patients say the target on their backs is painful after the latest DEA bust of a medical marijuana grow. Talking about the same, the waiting list at the Greenery in Ashland is long for patients needing medical marijuana, and it's bound to get even longer. Marina Ashrow is a patient and a volunteer at the Greenery. With Friday's bust, she expects to hear more of what customers have already shared the last 3 weeks. They'll say, all my medicine just got stolen. And I say, did someone come into your house? Did they take all your medicine? Did some group of hooligans come in and take all your medicine? No, it was the federal government, they answered. The 3 grows which DEA agents removed provided medical marijuana for specific patients in the area. The loss of those plants means the loss of their medicine for a whole year. As a member of the Greenery's Board of Directors, Jeffrey Carney only sees 3 options for the patients who lost their medicine. They suffer, return to prescription drugs, or turn to the black market. That's why he says it's just another win for the drug cartels. With the same demand but less supply and more danger, Carey doesn't think the growers will return. The caregivers are not going to produce it on the scale that it's needed, he said. Ashro, who gets sick when taking prescription pain pills, doesn't know what she'll do if she loses her supply of medicinal cannabis. For me to have found an alternative that is the best thing ever, and for me to think that maybe that alternative is being taken away, it scares me. It scares me a lot. So once again, the federal government is attacking its people. This is a personal email this is from one of our friends down in that area. She writes, "Dear friends, there's no words that can describe the last weeks here in Southern Oregon. So many ups and downs. Good news, High Hopes Farms toured Oregon lawmakers. Great job, James." I've got a story on that I'm going to read in a minute. Sad news, there have been 5 OMMP compliant gardens raided since August 24th. So I have been present at the latest 2 raids upon receiving calls that the feds were in action again. I drove to the gates of the farms. With much sadness and anger, I watched as gardens were ripped out with no respect for our sacred plant. For the moment I took over as director for Southern Oregon NORML nearly 3 years ago, I have worked in an effort that all cannabis groups work together. The support and compassion of many patients and cannabis organizations here in Southern Oregon has been overwhelming. Patients are donating their own medicine to victims of the raids. Food has been coming into our food pantry for the families, as well as some equipment for the growers to start again, as the feds seized equipment from the grow sites. This war on drugs has turned good people into criminals. Sick patients are returning to pharmaceuticals, and our rights are being stripped away. Freedoms include marijuana, guns, free speech of the media, our right to be safe in our own homes. The list continues to grow. We must fight for those who cannot. We must speak out and continue to work together. Southern Oregon has set a very good example of how organizations can overcome personal differences, both past and present, so that goal is closer to our grasps. And also, they had one protest this last weekend. There's another one coming up, and in fact, I'll have to report on that later because it'll be happening before the show is shown. So I'll be letting you know how that went. But it's another protest scheduled for October 19th on Wednesday at high noon. So, yeah, this was an interesting turnabout. Federal marijuana raids rankle state lawmakers. This is out of Jacksonville. Recent raids by federal agents who seized medical marijuana by the dump truck load have rankled some Oregon lawmakers who say federal authorities are overstepping their authority. During a tour Thursday of one of the garden's biggest and most sophisticated medical grow sites, Representatives Dennis Richardson, Republican, Central Point, and Sal Esquivel, Republican of Medford, said they believe some growers are abusing Oregon's medical marijuana law, but law enforcement should be left to Oregon as the state's right under the Constitution. It is not appropriate for the federal government to come in and assume authority just because they have the power to do so, Richardson said. And by the way, they remember he's Republican, so that's fairly complimentary that he's actually got it right this time. In a tougher stance by the Obama administration, federal authorities have been cracking down on medical marijuana nationwide, particularly in California, where landlords recently were warned that they could lose their property if they don't kick out growers and dispensaries. Senator Alan Bates, Democrat, Ashland, a doctor who has about 30 patients using medical marijuana in place of opiates, likened the situation to federal pressure against Oregon's assisted suicide law, adding he hoped State Attorney General John Kroger would take legal action to settle the differences in state and federal law. Side note there, my opinion is don't hold your breath on that one. These people are caught in the middle, he said, of growers. Since Oregon voters made it legal to grow marijuana for medical use in 1996, federal eradication efforts in Oregon have focused on Mexican drug cartels, growing huge plantations on public lands. This month, federal agents changed course and started raiding large medical marijuana sites in Jackson County, hauling away hundreds of plants. The third raid was Friday. So far, no one has been charged criminally, and court documents remain sealed. U.S. Attorney Dwight Holton has said federal law clearly trumped state law, and the raids were prompted by evidence that medical marijuana from Oregon was increasingly being sold in other states. Again, side note on that, there's always abuse in every program, and probably is some, but that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Oregon was already a leading marijuana exporter way before the medical marijuana law ever came into effect, and that's also who the growers are growing for. It's for export. It's certainly not for local consumption. So anyway, back to the story here. It said that Richardson and Bates said it was unlikely that medical marijuana would make it into the 4-week special legislative session this February due to more pressing budget issues, but the regular session in 2013 would be a good time to address the issue. Spokesman Tony Green said that the state attorney general had no comment on the issue at this point, but Green noted that U.S. Supreme Court has ruled on the issue. The Supreme Court ruled in 2005 in a 6-3 decision that the federal government can prosecute homegrown marijuana even in states that have legalized medical use. Kroger has defended the right of medical marijuana users to have concealed handgun permits though federal law prohibits the sale of firearms to drug abusers. The High Court upheld Oregon's physician-assisted suicide law in 2006, rejecting a Bush administration attempt to punish doctors who help terminally ill patients die. So anyway, that goes on, and anyway, we do have some lawmakers that at least are speaking out against the atrocities that the feds are bestowing on the people down in Southern Oregon. And of course, our friends from the Association of, I'll get it right here in a minute here. But anyway, American Safe Access, thank you. The federal government has launched a major attack on medical cannabis patients and growers, and Americans with Safe Access is calling on you to fight back. And they gave some good points here. They got 5 points to do. It says, things look bad, but we know the grassroots power can make a difference. ASA is responding to the federal escalation with a campaign to cut political pressure on the DOJ, Department of Justice, reframe the public dialogue about medical cannabis, and fight back in court. We are also gearing up to support local organizers who are fighting state and local efforts to roll back safe access in their communities. You can be a part of this campaign right now. Here are 5 things every patient and advocate can do to fight back. Number 1, call or email your representative in the U.S. House of Representatives to support and co-sponsor Barney Frank's H.R. 1983. This bill will reschedule cannabis under federal law and protect patients and providers in states where local or medical cannabis is already legal. Number 2, email President Obama and ask him to stop the federal attacks on medical cannabis. The president must live up to the promises he made of a more enlightened federal policy. Sign the petition to the White House to help show overwhelmingly public support for medical cannabis and opposition to the federal crackdown. Speak up in the media. Write a letter to the editor, to your local newspaper. Call into a radio or internet talk show, or post comments to stories online. Use ACE's Advocates Training Center to get ready. Number 5, organize or attend a peaceful protest against the federal crackdown in your community. If the president is visiting your hometown as part of his re-election campaign, consider using your event to coincide with his visit. Use ACE's Advocates Training Center to learn more about organizing and promoting public events. So that's ASA.org, ASA, Americans with Safe Access. That's an excellent organization, and my not to ever to be humble opinion is probably one of the top 3 organizations in the United States working for reform in the cannabis laws. And speaking of this whole federal crackdown, I saved this piece to last in this whole range of stories. Decision to crack down on medical marijuana was made in California, not in Washington, the U.S. Attorney General says. The decision to crack down on medical pot establishments in the Golden State was a collective decision by 4 U.S. attorneys in California and not the result of any directive from Washington, according to a spokesman for California-based U.S. Attorney Andre Byrat Jr. Federal prosecutors launched an attack on medical marijuana shop owners last week, vowing to shutter state-licensed marijuana dispensaries regulated by local governments and threatening landlords with property seizures. The announcement came in spite of the Obama administration campaign promise to maintain a hands-off approach toward pot clinics adhering to state law, with Attorney General Eric Holder publicly asserting that federal prosecutors would not initiate enforcement actions against any patients or providers in compliance with state law, deeming it an inefficient use of scarce government resources. Keep that in mind when you think about those Medford raids, by the way. Now California-based U.S. attorneys are taking on the battle themselves. There was no particular incident that prompted our enforcement actions, Tom Mrozek, the spokesman for Brody's, told HuffPost in an email on Friday. Across the state, we have seen a fairly significant increase in the problem over the past couple of years. And at least in our district, our actions were prompted in part by widespread concern among local officials. The city of Lake Forest is a particularly good example of this. On Thursday, the owners of 8 Lake Forest medical marijuana shops were given 3 days to close operations. Byrat said the shops were targeted because they violated a zoning ordinance, and as the city had already spent almost $600,000 in legal fees to have them removed. Other dispensaries could simply be taxed out of existence. Last month, Harborside Center lost the high-stakes battle with the Internal Revenue Service in a ruling that could have dire consequences for the thriving California industry. The IRS has ruled pot clinics cannot deduct operating expenses from their tax returns, recently informing Harborside, a dispensary where medical marijuana patients can buy legal cannabis in Oakland and San Jose, that it owed $2.5 million in taxes, a full $2 million more than the 83,000 member dispensary actually paid. The stress in which the initial warning, or the areas in which the initial warnings have been sent, are all areas where local officials have taken steps to eliminate marijuana stores and have asked the federal government for assistance. Mrozek told the HuffPost, adding that the United States Attorney's Office will continue to work with local municipalities and local law enforcement throughout California's Central District to assist in ongoing efforts to combat commercial marijuana operations. And by the way, on a side note, go back to Medford for a minute. Also, some other things I've been reading, there's some charging that the sheriff's department in the Southern Oregon, which lost a court battle recently, tried to keep a medical marijuana patient from obtaining a concealed weapon, lost that fight in court. So the charge is that he or a couple of the county sheriffs in that area are the ones that are went to the feds, the same type of thing, went to them for help. So we don't know if that's for fact or not, but it would certainly point that way after reading what's happened in California. Especially when our Oregon U.S. Attorney, Dwight Holton, has already spoken out quite negatively about medical marijuana. In fact, he's the one that was saying that so much of it is being exported. So anyway, it says that federal prosecutors have also suggested the industry has been hijacked by profiteers. All of the evidence indicates that the marijuana stores in California are for-profit enterprises, which is one reason why we're using term stores for these operations, Mrozek said. I am not saying that there are no true nonprofit collectives involving only patients and their primary caregivers that are operating stores. That may be, but we have not seen one yet. This statement is based on numerous federal investigations, as well as numerous investigations and prosecutions of local officials throughout the state. While none of the dispensaries are IRS-approved 501c nonprofits, many like Harborside, a state-registered not-for-profit corporation, say they go out of their way to give significant revenue back to the community by donating to local charities. Earlier this week, U.S. Attorney Laura E. Duffy, whose district includes San Diego County, announced plans to target newspaper and radio outlets advertising medical marijuana. I'm not just seeing print advertising, I'm actually hearing radio and seeing TV advertising, she said in an interview with California Watch and KQED. It's gone mainstream. Not only is it inappropriate, one has to wonder what kind of message we're sending to our children. Excuse me. I would get a kick out of that when we're talking about sending messages. But the three other U.S. attorneys charged with enforcing state laws have not signaled support for Duffy's line of attack. Our office is not targeting newspapers or publications that accept advertising money from the medication marijuana industry, Lauren Horwood, spokesman for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of California, told HuffPost on Friday. Meanwhile, legalization advocates say they fear Obama administration officials will be too busy to intervene. Tom Engel, spokesman for legalization advocacy group Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, explains, I think it's mostly a case of aloofness on the part of the president and his closest advisors. My hunch is that this is the doing of career drug war bureaucrats, somewhere in the Department of Justice, excuse me, who are quite terrified at the increasing public acceptance of regulated marijuana distribution. They've made a calculation, sadly correct so far, that the president doesn't even care enough about this issue to intervene. Unfortunately for the president, though, voters are going to blame him at the ballot box. Others insist the directive did in fact come from Washington. I don't believe that for a second, said Steve D'Angelo, executive director of Harborside, when told federal prosecutors said the decision for a crackdown was made in California. The recent actions by the U.S. attorneys in California are part of what appears to be a coordinated multi-agency assault by the federal government on the entire medical cannabis community. And that assault seems to be directed at systems of regulated and licensed systems of cultivation and distribution. So, yeah, that kind of fits right in with what's going on in Oregon, too, somewhat. We don't have sales here, or at least state legalized sales. However, they do in California. So that's one of the reasons why California has always had more trouble than Oregon. Oregon law is specifically written so that medical marijuana cannot be exchanged for any consideration, is actually how the law is written. So anyway, that's the whole thing in Southern Oregon, and the feds, so as disgusting as it is, that's our government at work. And speaking of our government, it says the labs are gone, but the meth still leads arrests. This is out of Coos County. Although heroin is on the rise, meth still tops the arrest chart among illicit drugs in Coos County. In the past year, police have arrested 467 people for meth-related crimes. Toby Floyd, director of the South Coast Interagency Narcotics team, said there was some good news. Meth labs continue to drop like flies. This is the first calendar year that we have not processed a meth lab since the inception of skint, Floyd said. The drop is a statewide trend over the past 10 years and driven by a ban on the over-the-counter drug that can be used to make meth. However, despite the decline in labs and doubling of meth price in the mid-2000s, Mexican drug cartels have filled the supply gap. Surprise. Floyd said that they could never know the exact number of meth users in Coos County, but he suspected it had remained roughly the same over the last 10 years. Some of the places that we go for, we are dealing with individuals in their 60s who are using meth, their kids are using meth, and their grandkids are using meth in some instances. The higher prices of meth have also caused a spike in 2008 of cocaine use. However, Floyd said they hadn't arrested anyone for cocaine since then. looking at the wider drug picture, marijuana was showing up more in schools and on the street. Floyd said that since Oregon introduced medical marijuana in 1998, the drug's prevalence continued to rise. The price had dropped to a quarter of its value from 6 years ago. Before that, it was grown in a closet, and the crops were not high yield. And now they run into 2 homes that's just leased to grow marijuana. So, in other words, the point is that the marijuana increase is increasing, and then they want to clamp down on it, and that's the cause of the least problems of all. So that's the irony of it. Real quick note here, this is a Gallup poll, very exciting, record high, 50% of Americans favor legalizing marijuana use. And it says that the breakdown is interesting, where it says 12, let's see what are the ages, I can't put my finger on it. Anyway, I run out of time here, but the point is that for the first time, we're starting to look like we actually have the poll figures to show that legalization could pass. And so that's kind of one of the things that the activists have been waiting for. So anyway, we have a lot of bad news, and we have some good, but that's always what it is, good and the bad. So in the meantime, be sure and come by and see us if you like. Come by any Monday to the Community TV 29 studios, Monday night at 4 o'clock, and come by and come on the show, or just come by and watch. You're more than welcome. So again, support your cannabis users. It's all a freedom issue. So this is DanK, and I will talk to you on the next show. Thanks.
And now a message from the American Marijuana Growers Association.
Hi, I'm a farmer, and I work hard every day to grow high-quality marijuana, the biggest cash crop in these United States. I'd like to thank you for your support of U.S. marijuana policy. Because marijuana is illegal, I don't have to pay taxes. Even better, prohibition leads to artificially inflated prices, which means a better quality of life for me and my family, as long as I don't get caught. Just as importantly, your tax dollars support thousands of U.S. agents who work tirelessly to keep low-grade, foreign marijuana out of our country. So thank you, America. And remember, whether you're nauseated from chemotherapy or just in the mood for a nice cool buzz, choose the best pot in the world, American homegrown.